It's good to see some of the college students coming back. We have our teachers' work day and orientation times tomorrow and Monday and Tuesday, so some of them are back for that. Probably, at least I was, a little nervous about what was coming as a student teacher. School starting made me think of a couple things. One is informal, and I try to keep it informal. No prize for it. The student to earn the first demerit. By this time next week, we may have a winner. All right? I've hesitated to offer a prize for that because I could see some saying, well, that's worth it. I'm going to get it. So we may know by next week. Also, school makes me think of drowsy students in class. All right, so the Schrocks have an excuse. All right, they're a little jet lagged, but all the rest of us should be alive and excited and alert. And, sorry family, makes me think of jokes. My students love my jokes. They pretend like they don't, all right, but I can tell. My wife, this is a joke. My wife said, I wish you would treat me like you did when we were dating. So I said, all right. No. Got all dressed up fancy, cleaned the car up, and took her out for dinner, took her out for dessert, and then dropped her off at her parents' house. And then I went to the doctor recently, and he only gave me a month to live. After the shock got over, I explained that I'm not going to be able to pay my bill. So he reconsidered and said, I have a full year. All right, that wasn't as good. All right, we're going to talk about, I've got it titled, Clarity About Our Hearts. I was actually thinking about school. That's one of my opening illustrations here. I really enjoy teaching. I don't know if my students enjoy it, but I enjoy it. And really, for a certain extent, it doesn't matter the grade level. I substitute in the K-5 class periodically. And for that little bit of exposure, it's kind of enjoyable. I've never done the K-4. But first and second, there's something about teaching something that is enjoyable to me. The taking some concept or some idea and getting a clear picture of that in these kids' minds. And when they see the light bulb come on and wow, they understand it, that's enjoyable. So maybe tonight we'll get to that point. I'm hoping at least to clarify what the Bible means about the word heart and what some of the passages mean that come across that. This comes out of really something I've studied and have enjoyed and been challenged with, and eventually came to this. So clarity about our hearts. Thought of another example of clarity. I don't know if you listen or are familiar with Dennis Prager, has all kinds of videos, and anyway, he speaks frequently about the need of clarity and how clearly identifying what you're thinking about, how important that is. So he gave an illustration that I thought was at least interesting. He was teaching and said that marriage is much better than living together. And there's moral reasons, and God commands it, other things like that. But he wasn't talking about it. He said marriage is better because it's clear or clearer. In a marriage, both sides come together and for the most part are expecting the same thing. When two people are living together, it's not exactly clear what they're expecting, how long it's going to last. It's not clear. And this idea of clearly understanding what something means, what's expected, helps understand what's going on. So today we're going to try to look at the word heart in the Bible and hopefully get a little bit of a clear understanding of what it means and what some of the passages that use it teach us. So, all right, let's first of all look at some of the things that the word heart doesn't mean. All right, we have the word heart today, and it's used in all kinds of ways that aren't really what the Bible is getting at. All right, some examples. She played the viola from the heart. All right, there would mean something like played sincerely or intensely, something like that. Or the boy played soccer with heart. They were talking about somebody who was courageous and competitive and aggressive. That's not necessarily what the Bible's teaching. or meaning, but the word heart. We could say somebody learned our verses by heart. We talk about memorization. That really isn't it. So we use this word heart a lot in our world today. Sometimes we mean the types of things the Bible says, but not always. All right, the Bible word for heart carries with it, it means the center of something, but in particular for us, when it's talking about our heart, there's three components we can think about. It's our thinking, it's our emotions, and it's our will. Or will sometimes can be a little bit vague. That would be our decision making. Our thinking, our emotions, and our will. So when we run across these verses in the Bible that talk about our heart, for me at least, it's helpful to stop and think. That's saying I need to do that from my thinking, from my emotions, from my will. Not this vague, like I'm going to be aggressive as I do it, or I'm going to be passionate as I play. My thinking, my emotions, and my will or my decisions. Two just quick examples of this. Ephesians 6:6, not with eye service as men pleasers, but as the servants of Christ, doing the will of God. And you know the phrase, from the heart. From our thinking, our emotions, and our decisions. That's where it starts from. Another verse, Hebrews 4:12. For the word of God is quick and powerful and sharper than any two-edged sword, piercing even to the dividing asunder of the soul and spirit and the joints and marrow, and is a discerner of the thoughts and intents of the heart. It discerns what we think, our emotions, our will, or our decisions. That's what the Word of God can get to. So for me at least, it's been helpful when this word heart comes up to think about that definition, and then it makes the concept there not quite so vague. It's a little more concrete, and I can put my hand on it and then beat myself over the head with it a little bit more easily. So, all right, let's pray, and then we'll look at a couple more examples. Lord, we ask that you would help us tonight as we look in your word at this word heart. Help us to understand what the word means, and then as we look at these passages, understand what they teach. And as was already prayed, Lord, help us to respond to your word as it's presented. Lord, again, we thank you for how good you are to us. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. All right, the word heart appears over 900 times, more than worship. All right, so I figured if I just do a minute per word, all right, I'm kidding. I only picked out 10. All right, that doesn't sound so bad compared to 900. So I've got 10 examples. If it goes late, which would be unusual for me, we'll trim out some of them, not do them all. But I want to look at 10 times where this word heart comes up and try to think about what the passage is saying, again, with this definition in mind from it. So we'll start in the Old Testament and work our way through. The first passage is Deuteronomy 6:5. Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thine heart, and with all thy soul, and with all thy might. Jesus quotes this in Matthew 22. Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, and with all thy soul, and with all thy mind. So love God with all our heart. Yeah, we know the three parts of the definition. Love God with all of our thoughts. Think about it. We think a lot of thoughts through the day. And do they all focus on loving God? When we're sad, when we're angry, when we're happy, when we're scared, when we have that wrong thought in our mind, that's obviously not loving God. When we're tempted, when we're driving down the highway. Talking to Steve McWright today. He got stuck in traffic in Chicago. It's not surprising, but some of us don't have very loving thoughts to God as we're stuck in traffic sometimes. Right? Or the billboards that we drive by. All of our thoughts. Instead of thinking about things that please God or bring honor to God, how many of our thoughts don't qualify here for loving God? Think about our emotions. How many times are we happy or sad, maybe happy, about something that doesn't please God? Or we're sad when we're asked to do something that pleases God. All of our emotions love God. What about our will? Our decisions? What guides your decisions? Is it God and what He wants? Or is it your flesh, your sin, the world? And it pounds on us to make decisions. Friends? Where does the decision come from? Is it from loving God? So you can see there, when I read these verses and I think with that definition in mind, there's a whole lot more teeth there, a whole lot for me to think about. It's easy to say, oh yeah, I love God with all my heart. I'm like one of the soccer guys. I'm going to run until my shoes fall off and I collapse from exhaustion. But that's really not the thought there. All my thinking, all my emotions, and all my decisions should be focused on loving God. All right, that's the first one. Let's look at Deuteronomy 8:2. I'll read it. You don't have to turn there necessarily. It says, "And thou shalt remember all the way which the Lord thy God led thee these 40 years in the wilderness, to humble thee and to prove thee and to know what was in thine heart, whether thou wouldest keep his commandments or no." There's other verses that talk about this idea of God proving us or trying to find out what's in our heart. Psalms 26 has it. Psalm 139 says, "Search me, O God, and know my heart." If you think about that with this definition in mind, that's a prayer to pray with caution. I say that kind of in jest. God, know all my thoughts, know all my emotions, and all my decisions. Right? But God here was proving them to know what was in their thoughts. So think about what thoughts have you had this week that you're a little bit squeamish about knowing that God knows them. I have these thoughts, your parents never know about them, your wife or your husband never knows about them, but God does. He knows about them. What about our emotions? What emotions have you had? Your children, you were given some instruction by your parents, and you obeyed. At least you went through the motions, but there was that emotion inside that was completely ungodly. God knows about that. Adults can be the same way, our emotions. What about our decisions? God knows them all. He knows them all. So when it talks about God knowing what's in our heart, those are the things it's pointing at. All of our thoughts, all of our emotions, and all of our decisions, or all of our will. Let's go to another verse that kind of tags along with that one. Psalm 66:18. "If I regard iniquity in my heart, the Lord will not hear me." Again, there with that definition of heart, that means a little bit more, at least to me. If I regard iniquity in my thinking, in my emotions, or in my decisions, God's not going to hear me. I looked up a couple commentaries on this one. Albert Barnes said this: "That is, if I have indulged in a purpose of iniquity, if I have a wicked end in view, if I have not been willing to forsake all sin, if I have cherished a purpose of pollution or wrong," the meaning is not literally if I have seen any iniquity, for no one can look into his own heart and not see that is defiled by sin. But if I have cherished it in my soul, if I have gloated over past sins, if I am purposing to commit sins again, I'm willing to abandon, if I'm not willing to abandon all sin and to be holy. Dr. Sorensen said, "The thought is how that if we know there is sin in our heart and we leave it there, God will not hear our prayer. Unconfessed, unrepentant sin will cause God to ignore our prayer." So again, think about, speaking to me, the prayer time this morning. We talk about it bouncing off of the ceiling. Right? Did it go anywhere? If we know of sin and we don't deal with it, God's saying he's not going to listen. Think of the last verse where God knows our heart, and those things we're a little bit squeamish about realizing or remembering that God knows. Those are the things that if we don't get rid of, God's not going to hear our prayer. The Lord will not hear me, he said. God knows our heart. And he promises if we regard iniquity there, he's going to ignore that prayer. All right, another example. Proverbs 22:15. Every parent's favorite. Foolishness is bound in the heart of a child. You should have the children quote the rest. But the rod of correction shall drive it far from him. Okay, so foolishness is bound in our hearts. It's there. All right, and the idea of foolishness, really, it's getting at sin is the thought there. Sin, silliness and sin, it's bound in our hearts. So foolish thoughts. I don't have any sons, but I see sons at school. And sometimes boys have stupid thoughts, all right? and wicked thoughts, right? Girls, they smile better, but it's still the same. Foolish thoughts, it's bound in our children's hearts. Foolish emotions, sinful emotions are bound in our children's heart. Are our kids happy about things that bring glory and honor to God? Or are they only happy when they get their way, when they're doing their thing, when they're with their friends, when they're doing the activity that their flesh likes? Any other time, are they sad about things that bring honor to God? That's a foolish emotion. It's wrong. Are they children? Are our children pleasant and cheerful to their God-given authority? That's the right thing to do. All right? It's foolish. It's sin. God says it's bound in our hearts, in their hearts in particular. And then this might go without saying, foolish decisions. We can often see them act on those decisions. Sinful decisions. They make the wrong choice. And God says those things are bound in the heart of the child. Before we get to the second half of the verse, let me read you a couple of commentaries here. This is Matthew Henry. We have here two very sad considerations. One, that corruption is woven into our nature. Sin is foolishness. It is contrary both to our right reason and to our true interest. It is in the heart. There is an inward inclination to sin, to speak, to act foolishly. It is in the heart of children. They bring it into the world with them. It is what they were shapen and conceived in. It is not only found there, but it is bound there. It is annexed to the heart. Vicious dispositions cleave closely to the soul. There is a knot tied between the soul and sin, a true lover's knot. They two become one flesh. It is true of ourselves. It is true of our children, whom we have begotten in our own likeness. That was the first point. Second, that correction is necessarily to the cure of it. It will not be got out by fair means and gentle methods. There must be strictness and severity, and that which will cause grief. Children need to be corrected and kept under discipline by their parents. And we all need to be corrected by our Heavenly Father. All right, that was Matthew Henry. Dr. Sorensen summarizes it in 2 lines. Failure to spank a child will rather allow foolishness to grow in his heart. It's there. It's wrapped up. We can't get it out. So 2 points I want to make beyond that. One is, if we've not removed the foolishness by appropriate spankings, it's there. That foolishness is there. It's our job as parents to remove it. And God gives one prescription. Not that we can't do other things as we train our children, but God says that spanking is what drives the foolishness out. Not other means. And then the second point I said is the solution to this is spanking. Don't buy the lie that the world pushes on us. Right? Our children aren't special. We don't somehow have, everybody else's kids need spanking, but mine, he understands better than everybody else, so I can just talk to him. No, God says spankings. That's it. Children need to be spanked so that foolishness can be removed from their hearts. And again, the world yells at us, don't spank your kids, you need to talk to them, you need to be kind to them, they need a partner, they need a friend, whatever. We're going to have to actively fight that. Amen. All right? Actively fight it. We're going to have to intentionally say, I'm going to spank my children when they disobey. Because God says that's how the foolishness gets out. If we're just kind of on coast mode, we're not going to spank like we should. We're going to have to intentionally decide to do this, especially in our current culture that pressures there to be no consequences and everything to be fair and nice. And God says, spank them to drive that foolishness out. All right, so I forget what number that was. Proverbs 22:15, foolishness is bound in the heart of a child. All right, let's go to another one. Proverbs 23:17 and 18. It says there, let not thine heart envy sinners, but be thou in the fear of the Lord all the day long. For surely there is an end, and thine expectation shall not be cut off. So the thought's pretty easy. We shouldn't envy sinners in our heart, okay? In our thinking, in our emotions, in our decisions. We shouldn't envy sinners. And it's easy to say, but if we're honest, at least if I'm honest, sometimes I look at the unsaved world and think, wow, that would be nice to do that. I shouldn't envy them. I see them prosper. I see them have nice things, take vacations, take trips that I can't take because I'm saying this in jest. I'm stuck here serving God in my ministries on Sunday when I can't take these trips and do these fun things that they do. That's a wrong thought. Amen. Right? I should not envy them in my thinking or my emotions. I shouldn't let myself think, oh, how great that would be, how much fun I would. No. And then I shouldn't make decisions to do that. We should not envy sinners. We can look at them and we see all kinds of things that we can be jealous over. And God says, no, don't envy sinners. Don't let it come into your heart. Now, the verse doesn't stop there. It says, but be thou in the fear of the Lord. Instead of envying sinners, we should fear God. We should have a reverential fear and respect of God. That should be the thing that dominates us. So, thought of Dustin skiing. Let's imagine that Ryan gives him a job to do, or any boy in the room. Run down the street, take this to the neighbor's house, and come straight back. As he's going down the street, he sees kids playing at the playground, on the swings, sees other kids out, throwing a baseball, and he's thinking in his mind, man, that would be fun. But hopefully, he's thinking, Dad said to go straight there and straight back. And I'm going to do that. As we go through life, obeying God, we're going to see those things. We say, no, there's a God in heaven who's given me instructions. I'm going to busy myself doing that. I'm going to let that guide my life. Everyone can play around me, but I'm not going to be envious of that because there's a God that I fear more than I am envious of those things. All right, so instead of being envious, we should fear God. And then the end of that verse says, for surely there is an end. All right? If Ryan's son went to play, there's an end at home. Right? Probably about this long, about this wide. All right, there's going to be a spanking at home. Okay? In life, there's an end. In this world, there's consequences for sin. And in eternity, there's consequences for sin. It's only in this little short time of life where we're tempted to be jealous of the evil of the sinners. In eternity, there's not going to be any jealousy of sin. It's just this little window. We've got to remember the end as we do this. All right, let's go on to Proverbs 31, 10 and 11. Who can find a virtuous woman? For her price is far above rubies. The heart of her husband doth safely trust in her, so that he shall have no need of spoil. His thoughts, emotions, and decisions, he can intertwine them with his wife, trust her with his innermost thinking and thoughts. She's not going to take advantage of it. He can trust her. If you have a good wife, you'll understand the blessing of that, of having a wife that you can trust. So let's leave that there. All right, let's go to Jeremiah 17. Jeremiah 17:9. This is another one that we know. The heart is deceitful above all things and desperately wicked. Who can know it? I, the Lord, search the heart. I try the reins, even to give every man according to his ways and according to the fruit of his doings. All right, so the heart is deceitful above all things. That means our thinking, our emotions, our decisions are deceitful. They're going to lead us astray if we follow them. So this is not instructions that we should never think or have emotions, but this is instruction that we shouldn't let our heart decide what we think, or what our emotions are, and what decisions we make. Our heart is going to lead us off. We should let God decide that. So our heart will lie to us, guaranteed. And this shouldn't be something that we take on as a challenge. That, yeah, my heart's wicked, but I can handle it. No. It's going to lie to you. It's going to do damage. Why? Why do we give into it? It's just going to lie to us. And it's also wicked. It's not telling us lies to plan some secret birthday party and surprise us. It's telling lies with evil in mind. It's wicked. Why do we listen to it? Why do we give in? We should focus our hearts on what God wants. Let that decide what we think about. Let that decide what our emotions are going to be. Let that decide the decisions we're going to make. God should be in control of that. God gives lots of instruction we can look at, but a couple times God summarizes for us our whole job. And I like these type of passages. Ecclesiastes, fear God, keep his commandments. Simple to say, but wow, is that a lifetime of work to do? We should focus on that, not let our heart lie and get us into sin. Or you could think of Jesus in the New Testament, summarizing the whole law with loving God, loving your neighbor. God and what he wants, what brings glory to him, that should be what tells us what to think, what our emotions are and what our decisions are. Our heart is going to lie to us. Just recently, I was traveling with my wife, and her phone was leading the way, all right, the GPS. Let me tell the story and then give the illustration. We were going down 94, and I was just following her phone or driving and talking, and it had me get off. We'd hit traffic, and it had me get off. I thought, oh, it's running us through town around the traffic. But all it did was get us off, run us down the exit ramp, past the road, and then down the on-ramp, back into traffic. We skipped about a quarter mile of the traffic. I'm just following the GPS along. All right. I thought it was really interesting that the GPS, I always feel like that's cheating, but the GPS took us that way. My wife has no problem with it. But when we're following the GPS, we can let it guide us, or we can do what we want. Right? And in that picture, God's word and what he says is the GPS. We should follow it, not do what we want. When that thing had us get off the highway, I was just driving. I wasn't really thinking, but I could have said, no, I know better how to get there, and ignored it and I'd have been sitting there in traffic with my wife mad at me. He says, we could be right. See that car zooming by? That could be us, right? And I'd be sitting there in traffic if I'd gone the way I wanted. God should decide, and we follow. He's the one that tells us what to think. He's the one that tells us what our emotions are. He's the one that tells us what decisions to make. Our heart is deceitful. We should trust God. We shouldn't let our heart tell us what to do. All right. Proverbs 18:26 along the same line says, he that trusteth in his own heart is a fool, but whoso walketh wisely shall be delivered. Right? Our heart's deceitful and evil. Why do we trust it? All right, let's go to the New Testament. Look at a couple of verses. There, Matthew 6:21. For where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. All right in the middle of the Sermon on the Mount. Where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. This is, I like to think of this as a test for us. I once went to Mr. Stockman with my car. The engine wasn't running right, and he gave it a smoke test. Had a machine that generated smoke and took out a spark plug and stuck it in there, and it forced smoke into the engine, and wherever it came out was the leak. That test helped him diagnose the problem. And here we have a test to help us see where our treasure is, or see where our heart is. All right? Our treasure, the thing that we think is important, that's where our heart is. The things that occupy all of your thoughts. Now, we live in a world. We have to go to work. You have to get up and get dressed and fix things around. You have to do those things. But what dominates your thinking? Is it serving God, obeying God, pleasing God, God's word? Or is it sports or material things or money or cars? It tells us where our heart is. Your emotions, where do they take you? Is it time for church? And again? Or is it church? Yes, I'm going to come to church. I think we know which one is the right emotions. It tells us where our heart is. And then our decisions. We're making decisions that please God or that don't. It tells us where our heart is. Our heart obviously should be on things of God, things in heaven, not things on the earth. This gives us a test by that. All right, so Matthew 6:21, another usage of our heart. I got these out of order. 5:8. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. All right, pure means clean. Thoughts, emotions, and decisions. Someone's clean on the inside. That person shall see God. Lots of times we could think of a hypocrite as being somebody who's not pure in heart. They have a certain image on the outside, but what's on the inside isn't what they're seeing on the outside. It's not pure what's in there. Right? Pure in heart, they shall see God. I looked up trying to figure out exactly, different ideas from commentaries about this. This isn't teaching that, we have to do works to get saved. That is not what it's teaching. But it could be, there's a couple of thoughts, a couple of options I thought of. One, it could be saying that when we get saved, we repent and then have that pure heart as Christ's righteousness comes into us. Okay? So it could be that. It could be talking about somebody who just acts like they got saved. They say some words, but never really got right, never really got saved. They're not pure in heart. They're not going to see God. It could also be the hypocrite. They have such a jaded view of the world that they can't see God working. People will be getting saved all around them. And God's not doing anything. God could be doing marvelous things in their life, but their heart's so impure that they can't see it. And so there's a couple possibilities for that, but the point there is a pure heart is what we should have. Whatever definition we go with for seeing God, I want it. Right? But pure in heart is where that comes from. So it's Matthew 5:8. There's some other verses that Go along that same line, Jeremiah 29:13. And ye shall seek me and find me when ye search for me with all your heart. We're going to find God. We'll see him. James 4:8. Draw nigh to God, and he will draw nigh to you. Cleanse your hands, ye sinners, and purify your hearts, ye double-minded. Draw nigh to God, he'll draw nigh to you. The blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. All right, one more example. 1 John 3:21. Beloved, if our heart condemn us not, then have we confidence toward God. If you think about that, your heart doesn't condemn you. You think about your thoughts and emotions and your decisions, and there's nothing there for you to feel guilty about. Then we can go to God with confidence. That's a pretty hefty load to think about. But when we're in that position where we are right with God, again, we're never going to be sinlessly perfect. But when we go to pray and we know there's that nagging sin that we've ignored, we already know that God's going to ignore a prayer. We also have no confidence. We can go to God with confidence when we're truly right in our hearts, our thinking, our emotions, our decisions. Our heart. Right? I was hoping for two things out of this. One is that we'd understand what the word heart means. And next time you come across that word in the Bible, you can stop and think about our thinking, our emotions, and our will or our decisions. And what does that mean? That's one point here. And the other is we did look at 10 passages. And what God teaches, they're kind of just a shotgun of different ideas, but a lot of them are convicting to me. And if there's something that hits you, please get it right. Don't just say, okay, I understand what heart means and move on. Get it right. This is God's word. It should be what guides our decisions, not what we want. So let's pray. Lord, we thank you for your word. Thank you for how you teach us about our hearts. Lord, help us, as we heard, not to trust them. They're evil. Lord, we need to trust in you and let you guide, let you direct us. And Lord, help us as we think about these particular areas, Lord. If anybody was pricked by your word, Lord, that they would make decisions and make changes and get that right. Lord, again, we thank you for your goodness to us. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.